Hey, it's Syndicated Radio Talk Show host, author, singer Al Cole, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. I come from CBS Radio. My shows are nationally syndicated, and I've helped to pave the way to treating women, guys too, with the dignity that they deserve through my show. And my shows are aired on the biggest network out there, airing CBS radio shows, and that's Apple's iTunes radio network, under their professional news talk division, airing CBS and Fox News, NPR, BBC, the whole thing, even C-SPAN, so we get around. And I have my own broadcasting network as well, called the Al Cole People of Distinction Broadcasting Network, that features some of my talk show clients. And, you know, their podcasts goes out nationally, internationally, to the big markets, and through Apple. And one of my talk show clients, a good friend of mine, is the international actress Dee Wallace. Dee Wallace is the actress who starred in one of the biggest films ever, Steven Spielberg's E.T., the Extraterrestrial. We love that. And her show, Constant Creation, is aired every single week on my radio network and through Apple for extra visibility for Dee and the other people who aired their shows on my network. And also my alliance with the great Arianna Huffington, of the founder of the Huffington Post. My alliance with her brings in a whole bunch of guests as well, and a lot of my clients, and also a lot of feature for the people who air their shows on my network through Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global Network, which features millions, brings in millions of listeners and viewers all the time. You expect that from Arianna Huffington. Also, coming from CBS Radio, I'm a national voiceover artist, as well as a communications and business consultant. And what that means is that I've helped a lot of people over at CBS Radio, professional people, talk show hosts, and all of that stuff, to talk good and to put their messages in gripping ways to the public. And not only that, but I offer that, and I have a lot of clients nationally, internationally, who come my way and engage in my communications and business consulting if they're going to do a lot of talk, if they're going to be out there, live events, and if they're going to be doing the podcast circuit, if they have their own podcast, if they're going to be on TV, whatever. They come to me to tone up a lot of the messages, get them down to something that we could call a 5-minute core message where, wow, they can go any place because they can expand that into a 45-minute keynote or interview. And I also help people with, I'm a media expert and also a media consultant, and I help to get them a lot of media exposure. And also with my alliances with Arianna Huffington and a lot of the other big players out there, I can get them exposure as well and teach them a little bit about the different formats out there in TV and radio, podcasting, everything, so it can really upscale the work that they do. And my People of Distinction Humanitarian Awards is a winner as well. That's featured in New York on Capitol Hill with members of the U.S. Congress. U.S. Congressman Rob Whitman of Virginia, reaching out, sponsoring our events over at the Rayburn House office building in D.C., and great events in Atlanta and also in Florida. And check us out at peopleofdistinction.org. And you can email me at alcoholic@gmail.com. That's ALCOLEHOLIC at gmail.com. And I really want to thank my CBS radio listeners for coming up with that handle, Alcoholic. Seemed like from day one my listeners have been saying, Al, we love what you're doing there, brother. In fact, we're hooked on it. We're alcoholics, so we love that. And I'm also a New York Times best-selling author with Chicken Soup for the Soul. Chicken Soup for the Soul is distributed by CBS's Simon & Schuster, so we keep it in the family that way. Coming up, a guy who's into finance, high finance, and we love that. On People of Distinction, we love talking about money matters, investments, things along that line. This guy's name is Bob Nash. He's the founder of Nash Holdings, and, he offers investment opportunities. He's going to be talking about some of the newer things that Nash Holdings is doing And they're involved with a lot of the depth here, internationally, even with countries from NATO. Bob is going to tell us what he can tell us. There are certain things that are a little bit confidential. We understand that in the finance world. Bob's going to do his best to tell us about Nash Holdings, and he's going to do his best to engage you in Nash Holdings as well, because, hey, you're the people who might want to invest here, and he's going to give us some ideas about that. Run to NashHoldingsInc.com and get involved in the great and lucrative world of our guest on People of Distinction, Bob Nash. Welcome, Bob, to People of Distinction with Al Cole. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you, Al. What a personality. What a voice you have. I'm telling you.
Well, thank you.
And I'm a big fan already. I'm a big fan of Al Cole, Alcoholic. There you go, Alcoholic. And Ariana Huffington. I've been a big fan of hers for a long time.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate being here. Thank you for having me today.
My pleasure. And we appreciate you, somebody from the financial world, to give us whatever information you can give on, some financial dealings internationally and certainly in this country, maybe some things that are going on Wall Street, whatever. Let's talk about it, Nash Holdings. Let's start out first with when did you start Nash Holdings, and what are some of the things that Nash Holdings does, Bob? And, you can keep your reflections, like I said, to about a couple of minutes or so like that, because we're always under a time constraint on People of Distinction. But tell us a little bit about Nash Holdings.
Absolutely, Al. Thank you. Nash Holdings is a C corporation filed in New York State, and it is a holdings model of diversified partners and current and working in progress future businesses and different types of funds as well. And today I just had a nice call with Todd Schoenberger, our new president of financial strategies and broadcast marketing, about setting up a pilot hedge fund, which is very interesting. But about 2014, we're the first company in New York State, one of the first in the United States to file with the new Washington Congressional Jobs Act, Regulation D-506C, which is, quote, general solicitation, unquote. So that's part of the Jobs Act. Very interesting. So it's been about 5 years in the making. When you go to the website, people will see our success and the things that we've been doing, and I'll be glad to talk more about that as well.
Absolutely. And because of our listeners, who are very broad-based, and we have great listeners through Apple and everything else that goes out with our shows on the different network affiliates, I know that we had talked offline about maybe investment opportunities for people who are in that mid-range area, not necessarily the billionaires or the super multimillionaires, but kind of like everyday people, or maybe a little bit upscaled from that. And you mentioned investment opportunities starting at $1,000 at one point. Tell us how we can do that. Even invest $1,000 and make a whole bunch of money back. Is that a possibility here, Bob, for any of our listeners?
Yes, we believe so. Now, my newest strategy with a joint venture partner out of Saudi and Bahrain is a company called Profiting 3 Points, Inc., a New York filed C corporation. We call it P3P for short. And that is a strategy with the over-the-counter markets. So a lot of people are used to New York Stock Exchange, Euronext, or NASDAQ, et cetera. In the United States and Canada, more people are familiar with OTC markets or the pink sheets, as you know. But when you start to get internationally, the OTC markets aren't as popular or as well known to other countries. And an interesting fact with our core of the strategy is there's over 10,000 companies trading internationally on the OTCmarkets.com. And most of those are from the U.S., Canada, and maybe China and a few European countries, about 75% of that 10,000. It's amazing how for an example, in the Middle East, you have 22 countries, only 6 companies in that whole 22 countries, over 1 million businesses, only 6 companies are trading on the OTC. So with Profiting 3 Points, we'll do a reverse merger and get up and start trading on the OTC in the near future. 3-4 months or so is our target date. And right now we're taking first-in investors at a minimal $1,000 at 5 cents per share.
Wow.
So that's $1,000 would give you 20,000 shares of P3P. And those first investors, it's going to be a short period, maybe a month or two, and then we'll get listed and start trading on the OTC markets.
Isn't that something? Whoa, this is only off the cuff, and I'm sure it's not quite true. Hey, people, this goes out to you. That's how Microsoft started. And imagine the money that people have made through Microsoft over the years. Now, of course, I'm only quipping there. It's not actually the situation, but really what I'm getting to is get on board with that. That is an amazing opportunity, starting at $1,000 and just 5 cents there per share. Now, this is really something, and that's what Nash Holdings is all about. They're about you, my listeners, and the American people, and they're doing a great job. And we're going to be talking about some of the other things that are coming up with Nash Holdings that Bob is going to clue us in on. And also, we'll be getting into a little bit of the humanitarian aspects, because Nash Holdings also stands for World Citizens Against Racism, Hate, and Discrimination. So keep that in mind. That's a people of distinction subject, so we love that. And run to NashHoldingsInc.com and get involved. Make contact with Bob and do some investing there. And you'll be so glad you did, as they say. Bob, let's get into... now, you don't have to say anything that you can't say, and that is confidential, maybe non-disclosure agreements that you have. But I know you told me, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, a few moments ago, that you're dealing with some NATO countries, of course, outside of the United States. I think you mentioned Saudi Arabia. NATO is in the news, and we know that a little bit of revising of NATO and the Trump administration, what they're searching for with any sort of revisal of NATO. Tell us what you can about that, because my listeners are really intrigued by that. Nash Holdings reaching out to some countries that way. So whatever you can offer in information of how you're reaching out to maybe NATO, some NATO countries, and countries around the world with finance, not just within the United States, but finance is an international endeavor these days. So tell us a little bit about that aspect.
Thank you, Al. Well, I can tell you quite a bit, actually, with the part that we're working with now. When you say NATO, we hear NATO, people think right away, National Alliance Treaty Organization and defense and all that. But we're involved with an area of NATO. Now, there's 29 NATO countries, U.S. being one of the 29. And then there's about 30 to 40 non-NATO members that are what they call friends of NATO. So you're talking about, good 65, 70 countries and growing that work together with procurement of contracts. Some are defense contracts. A lot of them are non-defense contracts. So I was through a few of our current business partnerships. And as an example, I'll give you a little bit of an idea. We signed a contract back in February for a $7 million asset contract coming into Nash Holdings with a large investor that's an engineer out of Europe. And he is from one of the NATO countries, and he represents many of the engineering companies through many of the NATO countries. And this is very interesting because through this investor, not only was he interested in investing and believed in our leadership and our value and what we're doing, but on the other hand, he was able to open up a huge opportunity for us by working with us in this period now in the near future to where Nash Holdings can be approved on the NSPA NATO procurement website. So that means once approved on that website and a few other associations around it, we could actually work with these NATO countries to set up contracts that are all NATO approved contracts and be able to build business. And not only that, but like you mentioned, with non-discrimination, non-racism, treating everybody equal on the planet as we should be.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what my People of Distinction Humanitarian Awards is all about. It's international. I've been as I mentioned in my introduction, I've already honored 100 national and international unsung heroes at my events in New York, Capitol Hill, and Florida, Atlanta, and you're right on board with that, too. In fact, you were introduced to me by a wonderful humanitarian in Australia, Adam Greenwell. New Zealand. That's right, New Zealand. Yeah, forgive me, because there is a difference to people, down under.
I made the same mistake. So, no, you're correct on that. Actually, Adam is one of our executives. We have a couple business partnerships with Adam. Adam is an executive, senior management team member, and Adam's a very interesting person, as you know. And thank you, Adam. All the kudos out to you when you're here at this interview. So, that's the real thing that I look at. Now, remember, we talked offline. I come from a humble background, working class, Binghamton, New York, which is the home of IBM. IBM was founded in the Broome County, upstate New York, Binghamton area. And, I believe that those cliches where, you pay it forward, you help someone once and it comes back tenfold, those cliches. That's how my whole life has been. And I think it's better to put a smile on someone's face and open up the door. And when you mentioned small businesses and small investors, mid-sized investors, that's why I came up with the profiting 3-point strategy, because there are a lot of things that the smaller investor are locked out of when it comes to beginning IPOs or getting in first early. The regulations are starting to get a little bit more fair for the smaller investor, but we're not there yet. But with New Zealand, Adam and the things we're doing, we did create a new company. Him and I have partnered to be able to do some humanitarian opportunities and be able to grow together as we grow. Like everything, it's like a seed. We're growing every day. And nice thing about let me just wind this up. Nice thing about looking at our company is that when you go to our website, you could see the staying power. I like that term, staying power, and we've got a 4 or 5 year background. And before that, I was in banking, Florida, New York license from 87 to the meltdown in 08. So it's all up on the website. Our bios are very complete with our executive team.
Yes, and you have a great executive team. I checked it out, and I can vouch for this, people. It goes out to you, my listening audience. Nash Holdings is a great company to get involved with investment-wise, and as Bob was just saying, and I said even before that, world citizenship, helping out people all around the world as citizens of our human family against racism and hate and discrimination, and for the proactive things that really involve, that L word, love. Love of humanity and love of our businesses that help humanity. That's what People of Distinction is all about. That's what Bob is all about, and Nash Holdings too. And so run to that website again, nashholdingsinc.com, and get involved. Bob, we have some minutes left in the show, and I want to take it out with a couple of things here. Since we were talking about anti-racism, anti-hate, and anti-discrimination, and bringing people not only just from this country together, but all countries together, and now applying it to finance. And you've talked about this, but I want to home in on something. Back in the 50s and 60s, and when we used to think of financial dealings and moguls, and we used to think pretty much, and when I say we, not so much me, but knowing history.
Aren't you?
I'm a young guy, yeah. But see, I read a lot, and I know history, and I have people from all walks of life coming on my show, and all age groups and everything, so they edify me. Now, at a certain point, this country went from, it could have been right after the Nixon years and the Carter years, certainly in the years of Reagan and beyond. It was all of a sudden finance was not limited to Wall Street in this country. It wasn't, and Wall Street became international. It wasn't just the major U.S. companies, but things were very international after a certain point. And these days, if you go to Bloomberg, you listen to anything on Bloomberg, half of it is international talk. And most of the people on Bloomberg, the commentators and the specialists, the pundits, they seem to have accents these days. And that's a good thing, because we know that finance is much more than Wall Street, and Wall Street is much more than just, in New York City. International finance has become bigger than ever, hasn't it, Bob?
Yeah, you're reading my mind, Al. You really are. Absolutely. And mentioning Bloomberg, we just brought in Todd Schoenberger. Again, I'm going to mention it. Todd, he's been on for years, CNBC, Bloomberg TV and News Radio, Fox Business, Wall Street Journal, and you'll see that when you go to the website. But to answer your question, I'm going to answer it real quick in two ways. One is the worldwide investor, if you think about it, if you have an opportunity for more people than just North America or the United States, why not let people that can trust and see the value and the transparency of a company like ours and other companies, why not allow them to get in early and build that trust with a kind of circle of investment group? So when you look at P3P as a first OTC company, if we bring in value and we're returning healthy returns to those first investors, and then we create a second OTC business stock that's trading, and a third and a fourth, those first investors will then again be the first ones to have the first opportunity to get in on the second, third, fourth filing. That would be a public company. And you build that base. And my goal is to work worldwide. I don't believe, as you yourself do not, in discrimination. I don't like some of the things that we're seeing nowadays with the hate factor and people discriminating against culture and all the things we're seeing about build the wall or, these people, those people. Mm-hmm. That's not the way to build positive relationships on a global, worldwide market. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's important to build trust with the small, middle-sized business owner from different parts of the world, different continents, different hemispheres, different countries, and educate them as well. Like I said, the OTC markets, most people around the world are not familiar with this huge publicly traded over-the-counter market strategies and don't see the opportunities. And, of course, the best time is what? To get in the beginning rather than getting in once the stock starts to go up, because then you're purchasing at market price.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And, I'm going to add something to this right now at this point. This is People of Distinction talk. This is not necessarily limited to the financial area. It's not brokerage talk. It's not anything necessarily that Bob is saying about Nash Holdings. But it is important stuff here to go out to my listening audience, you right now. And I make reflections periodically on People of Distinction. What we're talking about, when we're talking about finance, as we know, this world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And one of the big reasons is the Internet. Over the last 20 years, it's had an amazing effect, to say the least, on people's lives. Everyday people now can converse with other everyday people, or sometimes, big shots, around the world in seconds' time through email and through their website connection. Everything now is social media. Now, it just seems that one of the things that should be in accordance with that, finance, income, economics. Why? Because one of the most important aspects of living life is making a living. And we use the two sometimes as if they were interchangeably. And on certain levels they are, and on other levels they're not. On the interchangeable level, well, we're out there with our jobs every day, and most people are not entrepreneurs. Only about 10% of the population here in this country are people who own their own businesses. They are the people who really work for the man, work for corporate America, work for maybe small businesses. They are the growing population of this country and around the world, but particularly this country, who have the right to invest. Invest in the future of this country. Now, investment is certainly financial investment. It's also social investment, political investment, and you could say humanitarian investment. The more we open up the door to everyday people having a stake in some of the financial issues of this country, for a long time, and even now to a great extent, everyday people think, oh, well, I can't invest. I can't really, what do I know about the stock market? What do I know about high finance? And we'll leave that to other people with the moguls. Well, if we leave it just to the moguls, then what we're doing is we're blocking out a lot of human genius from that. And we're blocking out a lot of people who otherwise could maybe be living life a little bit better as they're making a living. And sooner or later, as Bob was indicating, we have to let other people into the investment pool, the high finance pool. And I love the idea, even starting out at $1,000 like that, getting people educated that way. The more we're educated in terms of how to deal with our lives financially and economically, well, the more we feel secure about having a share at that seat nationally and internationally of helping out our brothers and sisters around the world. Because now we're saying, hey, look, I'm a stakeholder here. So yeah, I have a vision for the future. I have something that I can say. I have some input that I can give because, I'm getting something back right now, and now I want to give something to other people. Might not have a lot to give financially, but you got a lot to give with human genius and thoughts and encouragement and particularly inspiration. Finances and the financial dealings will give people the opportunity to have that seat at the table, the confidence to say, I'm a part of this too, and the confidence to help somebody else, not only just financially now, but humanitarianly as well. And I really believe that. Is that something that makes sense to you, Bob, the way that I put it?
Absolutely. Let me, it's funny you say what you just said. Very interesting. You're an intelligent man. And let me tell you, what I'm about ready to say is so important for the small person. You hear in the past, Al, and I've heard many people, hey, they'll call somebody or say, I've got $1,000. Do you have a good stock tip? That's not the way to look at it, because that's like, give me a good stock tip, something I can put the money into, and in a month or two, I might be able to double my money.
Yeah.
That's not what we're about. We're about longevity. We want people to be able to take $1,000 or more and know when they place it with us, as they see our success in our management style, our leadership on the website, that in 6 months, 1 year, year and a half, 2 years, it's staying in a valued position and it's growing. And we're not about those guys that we're not saying we can, turn your money around and double it in a month or two. We are starting a hedge fund for things like that for larger investors, but when it comes to what we're doing with Profiting 3 Points and P3P, it's exactly what you're saying, educating the smaller, mid-sized investor. And that's what we are doing too, Al. We're not just saying, invest in us. You see that we know what we're doing. We're actually educating those investors. They will receive emails, educational emails, many different things, how to read the OTC Markets website, how to do research, all these different keys and points. And you talked about something else too, like people think that they couldn't invest. That's why I wrote the Credit Fixer book that's on the website. Because I was in banking for many years, helping people fix their credit to get a business loan or a home mortgage decades ago. And I started thinking, I'm just going to finally write a book. And then when I was writing a book, you know what I said to myself, Al? I said, imagine right now 50-60% of Americans have problem credit. Imagine if when I can promote this book in a larger way, if I can help lower that percentage to where 20-30% of people have bad credit, not 50-60 have problem credit. The better credit scores for small business owners and people, that means the better interest rates they get on their loans. Mm-hmm. And that would make America stronger too, right? Because we have a lower percentage of problem credit people. So all these things are connected. And what you just said, really touched, and I'm hitting back with you that I'm in total agreement that we have to be able to educate the smaller investor. It shouldn't matter where you work, how much money you make a year. It should be about transparency. And I'm going to say this last sentence, Al, and see what you think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Nash Holdings, for 4 years, we were accepted with the Corporate Responsibility Association and the annual commit form, which is the Fortune 500s of the world meeting on Wall Street, at the NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchanges, closing bell ceremonies, roundtable summits at the boardroom in New York Stock Exchange, Euronext, and talking about what? Corporate responsibility, sustainability, treating women as equal as men in the pay, salary, philanthropy, charity. And our company, at one point, we were a featured gold member for 3 years in a row, 2012, 13, 14. And our logo was the only logo you didn't recognize. Everything else was like Bank of America, Clorox, Campbell Soup, Pirelli Tires, New York Stock Exchange, Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, Mattel. They were all Fortune 500 companies, Lockheed Martin. So, I mean, that's all on our website, too. So these things that you're talking about, we want to help the smaller investor, the mid-sized. And you know what, Al, as a holdings company, some of those small business owners in 5-10 years, when they're ready to sell their business, we may be the company that ends up partnering with them and buying that business from them so they can retire.
Absolutely. Well said. Hey, all right, people. Bob Nash for President 2020. We love that.
Boy, maybe 2024 or 28.
2024. That's right. Bob's still a young man, and I'll tell you, see, we need ideas like that. We need. It's not just politics, people. It's ideas, it's inspiration, and actually, it is education. And people who go out there and they talk about things like, hey, look, let's support the little guy here. And little guys, they're all of us, people. We're all born babies. We're all born real little guys, real little women, guys, girls. We're born babies, and those babies have a chance to live, and those babies have a chance to love. And when you're born as a baby and a baby lives in you, you're saying to yourself, wow, I love life. I'm looking around with love-colored glasses, and man, I can't wait to experience all of the beauty and love of life. If we go downhill, we can always go back uphill to whence we came, and that is the love of humanity. And I don't care what show I do, I always bring that back into it. And it's easy with Bob Nash because he does it even with the financial world. Nash Holdings .inc is where you want to go. NashHoldingsInc.com is where you want to go. Now,
if I could just say what you just said too, I'll go as far as to tell, if you're a business owner and you're frustrated and, you're looking at maybe closing down, or you're looking at how do I, get through the next year, the 2-3, I would be happy to be able to take your call and give you motivation. And just like you are, you're a very optimistic, outgoing, worldly personnel. And I think the more people like you and the more people that can work together and give people motivation, that's all it takes, is to give people some different type of, pair of glasses to look through, something they're not seeing, something that can help their business, something that could help their family, could help their personal life and their business life, and even a spiritual life.
Well, that's it. Hey, you said it too. And, we're going to cap it off here, Bob. Wonderful interview with some possibility thinking. All of my interviews, I end with possibility thinking because it's a way to encapsulate not only the information that was talked about, but particularly the spirit of any interview that I do in terms of what if. What if whatever my guest was talking about in very positive terms came to pass in our society? What kind of world would we live in then? I'm going to put it this way. The spirit of Nash Holdings, the way that you have communicated it in terms of, maybe starting out with the $1,000 investment and OTC markets and giving everyday people a chance to enter into that brokerage, so to speak, get that seat with high finance and understand a little bit. They don't have to make a killing. It's educational and it's inspirational. And now they feel that, well, boy, I've got a seat here and I can now talk about some other things. And they're growing through contacts and everything like that. It's the people of distinction way. If that became kind of like the modus operandi in our finance world, over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what kind of world would that eventually look like that it doesn't look like now in terms of that inspiring step of letting everyday people into some of the financial dealings of our country and our world? How would that look 20, 30 years from now, Bob?
Well, actually, it needs to speed up because the Securities Exchange Commission through Congress, back when Obama took office in 2008, they passed the Jobs Act. They didn't pass the language for the part of Jobs Act to make the playing ground equal for the smaller investor. So let me explain that. We've all seen these like, Rock the Post, GoFundMe. My relative has a disease and that people contribute whatever the cause is, right? Well, that's one type of crowdfunding. The other part of crowdfunding that we were hoping was going to be a little bit more aggressive has been turned back into more conservative, which I'm disagreeing with. And what I mean by that is the crowdfunding now that they finally have rewritten language in 2016 or early 2017 means that the small investor now can also get into an early IPO, like we've just seen Uber go public, or let's say Facebook back in 2012 when they started to trade publicly. They were selling stock 3, 4, 5 years before that, but only to the wealthiest people. They could be an accredited investor, right? So now with crowdfunding, they have loosened up the playing field to say that as a gross income yearly employee, you can invest up to 5 to 10% of your gross income. So let's take $50,000 a year. They're saying that you can invest upwards to $2,500 to $5,000 a year in an IPO as a non-accredited small investor. That, to me, is still too conservative. It's still too discriminatory. And I'd like to share this with the listeners. They don't stop us when we go to buy a lottery ticket. They don't stop us when we go to a casino or a horse track and say, oh, Bob, you've already gambled enough for the month of June. You can't gamble anymore to July. So because they don't have the measures to stop that, they shouldn't measure people that can get in on an IPO based on their income. Do you agree with that, Al?
Oh, absolutely. I agree that everybody has the right to live and a right to, as they're living life, to make a living, to make a good living that matches that good life. And if that's one of the ways that we can do it, I'm all for it. That's what People of Distinction really stands for. And I'm going to make my own end reflection here to cap it off on People of Distinction as well with that possibility thing that we're looking for. And this is a People of Distinction reflection. It goes out to you, my listening audience, right now. When we're talking about entering into the financial world, people, that world is already upon it. Always has been, time immemorial. We can go back as long as we want. We have always been people, even before money itself was created in coinage and dollar bills and everything. We always lived for something that was very precious to our lives. Hunters, gatherers, things along that line. We got to eat, and we need shelter. Those two things, right from the get-go, caused value. Whatever we valued that could help us to eat better, that could help us to be healthy and put a roof over our heads and guide us away from some of the storms and some of the natural disasters. Well, that's what we put a value on. Now get this, people. That value has never gone away. And I'm going to transition here in the People of Distinction way. At a certain point, we transitioned into, maybe after World War I, and with the creation of the Federal Reserve, transitioned into, really big banks, international banks, things along that line. And then gold and silver and this and that, and then got off the gold standard. And then now, you know what? People are questioning even the relevancy of money after a while. Gee, do I have to keep working, and staying away from my family? And is that really a good life? Guess what, people? At some point in the future, we're going to invent a different way of exchange. And that exchange doesn't have to be in dollar bills. We know about Bitcoin coming in. Maybe that's one of the things. But also, what about love digits? Whoa, Al, what are you talking about? Love digits? Man, what does that have to do with money? Well, it has to do with value, as I defined it. What we value in order to stay alive, first and foremost, survival, and a roof over our heads, and something that we can call, hey, this is nourishing, eating. Around the world, sometimes it's even hard for people to eat because they can't afford it. But if we do something, if we develop more and more ways to do things, to reach out to people in order to serve people with whatever genius we have, with whatever we can serve them with, and they're saying, oh, thank you. I can't pay you back in dollar bills, but I'm going to pay you back in services. My genius going back to you. After a while, that is going to be the new modus operandi of exchange in this country and around the world. Now, this is possibility thinking, people, but we don't get to ends without, first and foremost, putting possibility on the forefront, on the table. The internet was a possibility. 50 years ago, we didn't know about it. Wow, you're crazy. Talking about, we're going to get together with other people in other countries in record speed, speed of light. We've done that. So why not at least talk about modus operandi of exchange that are services to each other? You could call it bartering. A lot of people now, business-wise, they're bartering. They're not paying somebody else for services all the time. They're saying, well, what's the value that I can put on what you do, and vice versa, so we don't have to go into our pockets and get dollar bills and put them on, on the bargaining table. Let's serve each other with what we have inspirationally, what we can offer of value to somebody else. And after a while, we're going to really like that. And we're going to say, boy, we're living more responsible and responsive lives. And all of a sudden, money might not mean as much. I'm not against money. And I'm certainly not against people investing. I think that we need to invest in our heart and soul as a human family more and more, educate us in terms of how everyday people can reach out to every other day people in positive ways and say, take it. I'm offering you something of value. And we take it and we run with it and we give back things of positive value to each other. We enrich the heart and soul, and all of a sudden, we are helping each other out, and we're not even asking for anything back except give me more value of what you can give me. Because, wow, you are a human being too, and I relate to you now. And this is love investment. Whoa, love digits into the future. Al, I think I'm starting to get it. Good, thank you. It goes out to my listening audience. And for Bob Nash, boy, a big thank you here for being on my show, People of Distinction, talking this exploratory talk that we do on People of Distinction. Nash Holdings, one more time, you got to run to this website, NashHoldingsInc.com. Get involved in that way of doing business. Thank you so much, Bob, for being my special guest here today on People of Distinction with Al Cole, and I'll invite you back anytime for updates on what you do. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, Alf. Oh man, you're a great commentator. You have such an optimistic outlook. You actually made it very comfortable for me because, as in the way you broke it up too, as you did each of your dialogue, gave me time to think and plan my next statement. It was really good.